Okay, gotta admit, lately, the news about flying, it's been a bit, well, turbulent, to say the least. And if you're anything like me, you're probably feeling a little, well, apprehensive about that next trip, right? So we're going to deep dive into some of these recent events, try to figure out what's really going on,
Yeah.
and hopefully all of us will end up feeling a bit more informed, maybe a little less anxious about flying. We've got excerpts from this article. It's called What is Going On with Air Travel?
Ah,
And it covers incidents from January and February this year.
that sounds like a good goal. So where do we start?
Let's rewind back to January. That month had its fair share of, incidents. We saw a Cessna having to make an emergency landing in the Everglades, and it's relatively minor. But it
Yeah.
kind of sets the tone for what turned out to be a bumpy couple months.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Even a small incident like that can make people think, what if that had been my flight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's that Delta A330 that had to return to Minneapolis.
Mm.
If even those big, reliable planes are having issues, it makes you realize,
Yeah.
things can happen, even on what seem like routine flights.
Right. Right. And these smaller incidents, they might not be catastrophic, but they are important, I think, because they highlight how complex aviation is
Right.
and that potential for
Right.
unforeseen events.
Yeah. And then there was that really tragic collision between the American Airlines flight and that Black Hawk helicopter near D.C.
Yeah.
This wasn't just another incident. This was the deadliest U.S. crash in over 20 years, and it's still under investigation.
Yeah. The American Airlines and Black Hawk collision is a stark reminder of the inherent risks of air travel. It's a complex situation with multiple layers. On the one hand, you have a major commercial airliner.
Huh?
On the other, a military helicopter. And understanding how those two ended up on a collision course is going to be crucial to preventing similar tragedies in the future.
It's heartbreaking, and it definitely made a lot of people stop and think about the risks. And then, to make matters worse, January ended with that Learjet crashing in Philadelphia, again, resulting in fatalities. Not exactly a confidence-boosting start to the year for air travel, was it?
No, it definitely set a somber tone. But even with these events, it's important to keep in mind, statistically, these incidents are still rare when you consider how many flights happen every single day.
Okay, statistically, we're good. Then came February, and, well, I felt like things really escalated. Almost every day, there was another incident popping up in the news. I don't know about you, but I was thinking twice about booking my next flight.
Yeah, February did see a noticeable uptick in reported incidents, and that's bound to make anyone pay attention.
Let's run through a few. First, we had that United 787 with the smoke in the cabin. This one, I don't know, this one hit home for me because I think of those newer, supposedly safer planes as immune to this sort of thing.
It's a good reminder that any aircraft, no matter how new or advanced, is a complex machine with lots of systems that could potentially malfunction.
Then there was that Air Wisconsin CRJ-200 that hit a tug while taxiing. Now, I know it doesn't sound as dramatic as a mid-air collision, but it just shows you that incidents can happen anywhere, even on the ground.
Yeah, ground incidents.
Yeah.
They're a crucial aspect of aviation safety, and they often get overlooked. Taxiing, loading, unloading, all of it requires precise coordination and attention to detail. While they may not grab headlines like mid-air events, they can still be disruptive, and they highlight vulnerabilities in airport operations.
And then we had a little bit of comic relief, or at least as close as we can get in this situation. The Japan Airlines and Delta fender bender in Seattle.
Yeah. While minor collisions like that might seem humorous on the surface, they still cause delays and disruptions for passengers, highlighting the importance of clear communication and coordination among ground crews.
But then things took a serious turn again with that Bering air crash in Alaska. That was the third major U.S. incident in a very short period.
Yeah.
And the remote location just added another layer of tragedy and complexity to the whole investigation.
The Bering air crash was a terrible tragedy, and the challenging environment in Alaska definitely adds another layer of difficulty to the investigation and recovery effort.
Pictures, those pictures of the wreckage scattered across the air Bering Sea ice really stuck with me. Chilling reminder of how unforgiving nature can be, especially in those remote regions.
Absolutely. The environment plays a significant role in aviation, in this case, the remote location.
Yes.
And those harsh conditions just magnify the consequences of the incident.
And then the crash involving Vince Neil's private jet in Arizona means when you see a rock star's plane going down in flames, it gets your attention.
Yeah. Celebrity involvement tends to amplify media coverage. But beyond that, this incident brings up some critical points about private aviation. The investigation into that fiery crash is probably going to focus heavily on pilot training and aircraft maintenance, areas where we sometimes see differences compared to commercial airlines.
And it's not just civilian aviation we need to think about. The Navy Growler crash in San Diego Bay was a reminder that even highly trained military pilots flying sophisticated aircraft aren't immune to accidents.
Right. For those unfamiliar, a Growler is a type of electronic warfare aircraft used by the Navy. These aircraft are designed for demanding missions, and while they are flown by some of the most skilled pilots in the world, incidents like this underscore the inherent dangers associated with military aviation.
Thankfully, in that case, the pilots were able to eject safely. Then we have that Delta CRJ-900 that practically flipped over while landing in Toronto. Dramatic scene. But thankfully, everyone survived. High winds were a major factor, showing how weather can really throw a wrench into things, even during landing.
Yeah, the Toronto incident highlights the incredible skill and training required of pilots to handle extreme weather conditions. Aircraft design also plays a role because engineers are constantly working to improve an aircraft's ability to withstand strong winds and turbulence.
And to wrap up this roller coaster of a month, we had 2 mid-air collisions between small planes.
In Arizona.
2 in 1 month. Gotta make you think twice about hopping into a Cessna.
Mid-air collisions are thankfully rare, but they raise concerns about airspace awareness, particularly in areas
So the high density of small aircraft. These incidents often prompt investigations into pilot training, air traffic control procedures, and the effectiveness of collision avoidance systems.
Now, by this point, you might be thinking, okay, that's enough bad news. But hold on, because the last week of February, that's where things get really interesting. And we start to see a shift in the narrative.
Oh, how so?
We start getting reports from less official sources, social media, online forums, the digital grapevine. Suddenly, the picture starts to get a bit more complicated, a bit more murky. Interesting. It seems like we're moving from official reports and investigations into the realm of public perception and online discussion.
Exactly. The first thing that pops up is talk of a Delta plane in Georgia.
Right.
Having smoke issues, but the details are really sketchy.
This is where the age of instant information can be both a blessing and a curse. While social media can be incredibly valuable in getting news out quickly, it can also contribute to the spread of misinformation and incomplete information. Good point. Got to be cautious about the information we consume online, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as aviation safety.
Absolutely. Then there's that Southwest flight that had a near miss with a private jet while I was trying to land in Chicago. No collision, thankfully, but a very close call. Makes you wonder what's going on up there.
Yeah, near misses, they're always concerning, and they often provide valuable insights for improving safety protocols. In this case, the investigation would probably focus on air traffic control procedures, pilot communication, and the proper function of that. Traffic Collision Avoidance System, or TCAS, which is designed to prevent these types of incidents.
TCAS, I've heard that before, but I'm not really sure what it is. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. TCAS is essentially an automated safety system that uses radar to detect potential collisions between aircraft. If a conflict is detected, TCAS issues alerts and instructions to the pilots to guide them to take evasive action. It's a critical layer of safety in preventing mid-air collisions.
So in this case, the system should have alerted both the Southwest pilots and the pilot of the private jet to that potential collision.
That's right. The investigation is going to look into whether the system functioned properly, whether the pilots received and responded appropriately to the alerts, and whether any other factors, like weather or communication issues, contributed to the near miss.
And then there's that United flight from Newark to Delhi that received a bomb threat. It was even escorted by Italian Air Force jets before landing safely. I can't imagine what the passengers and crew must have gone through.
Yeah, bomb threats are thankfully rare. But they are taken extremely seriously. When a threat is received, airlines and authorities follow strict protocols to ensure the safety of everyone on board in this case. Scrambling fighter jets to escort the aircraft is a standard precautionary measure, and it shows the level of concern and coordination involved in these situations.
So it's not just the actual threat itself, but also the response and the impact it has on everyone.
Exactly. Even if a threat turns out to be a hoax, the emotional toll on the passengers and crew can be significant. And these incidents also raise questions about security measures at airports and the
Right.
effectiveness of intelligence gathering to prevent these kinds of threats in the first place.
On top of everything else we're hearing about, a small plane crash
Yeah.
in Texas. The details are scarce. And then there are rumors of even more near misses. One in Chicago, which might be the same Southwest incident we talked about. Another one in D.C. It started to feel like we're only getting a fragmented picture of what's really going on.
Yeah, you're right. We often rely on official reports and media coverage to understand these incidents. But we also have to consider that there might be other events that don't make the headlines, or the information is incomplete or conflicting. That's why it's so important to be critical of the information we're consuming and to look for multiple sources and perspectives.
So we've got all of this swirling around, right? Confirmed incidents, unconfirmed reports, social media chatter. It's a lot to digest. So from your perspective, is there an actual trend here?
Right.
Or are we just dealing with a string of isolated incidents? What's the big picture takeaway?
Well, it's tempting to see a pattern in all these events, especially when they're happening. It's so close together. But it's important to analyze the data carefully and to avoid
jumping to conclusions. So how do we make sense of all of this? What are some of the key factors that contribute to these aviation incidents?
Well, we can break it down into a few main categories: weather, mechanical issues, human error, and security threats. Weather, as we saw with that Delta incident in Toronto, can create incredibly challenging conditions for even the most experienced pilots. Mechanical failures, whether it's an engine problem, a hydraulic system malfunction, or an electrical issue, can also lead to serious incidents.
Right, and then there's the human element. Pilots are highly trained professionals, but they're still human, and then things can happen.
Absolutely. Human error can show up in many ways, from miscommunication between pilots and air traffic control to lapses in judgment. And then, of course, there are security threats, like the bomb threat on that United flight, which, as we discussed, require a whole different set of protocols and responses.
So when you look at the events from January and February, do any of these factors seem to be more prevalent? Are there any patterns emerging?
Well, while investigations are ongoing, for many of these incidents, we can make some preliminary observations. Weather appears to have played a role in several cases, including the Toronto landing and the Bering air crash. Mechanical issues are always a possibility, but without more concrete data from the investigations, it's hard to say for sure.
And human error is always tricky to pin down, right?
Exactly. It's often a contributing factor, but rarely the sole cause. Investigations usually reveal a complex chain of events where multiple factors converge, including human actions or inactions. It's important to avoid oversimplifying these incidents and to understand that complex interplay of various factors.
What about security threats? Aside from the United bomb threat, do we see any other potential red flags?
Too early to say definitively. However, the rise of social media and instant communication means we're more aware of potential threats than ever before. A single tweet or forum post can spark widespread concern. Even if the threat turns out to be unsubstantiated, this can make it difficult to separate genuine security concerns from unfounded rumors.
Or misinformation. It's almost like you're bombarded with so much information that it's hard to know what to trust. So how do we, as informed travelers, approach this? Are we actually seeing an increase in incidents? Or are we just more aware of them? Because of the constant news cycle and social media?
Okay, great question. There's no doubt that media coverage, especially in the age of social media, amplifies awareness of aviation incident. A minor incident that might have gone unnoticed in the past can quickly become a viral sensation. And that creates the impression that air travel is becoming inherently riskier.
So is it all just a matter of perception? Or are we just more attuned to these events now? Because they're constantly in our faces.
It's not quite that simple. While media coverage definitely plays a role, it's also important to remember that aviation is one of the most heavily regulated and scrutinized industries in the world. Safety protocols are constantly evolving, and even minor incidents are thoroughly investigated to identify areas for improvement.
So it's a balance between understanding that media coverage can sometimes inflate our perception of risk, while also acknowledging that the industry is constantly working to improve safety.
Exactly. It's about being informed and discerning consumers of information. We need to be aware of the potential for bias and sensationalism in media reporting, while also recognizing the genuine efforts being made to enhance aviation safety.
Okay, so with all this in mind,
Yeah.
what questions should we, as informed travelers, be asking ourselves in light of all this information?
Well, firstly, we should be critical of the information that we consume. Is it coming from a reputable source? Are the details verified? Are there multiple sources corroborating the information?
So basically, don't just take everything you read online at face value.
Secondly, we should remember that risk is inherent in any form of travel, including aviation. No system is foolproof. Even with all the regulations and training in place, incidents can and do happen.
So it's not about eliminating risk altogether.
Yeah.
But about managing it as best we can.
Precisely. Being informed about potential risks allows us to make more reasoned decisions and to take appropriate precautions, for example, staying updated on weather conditions, considering an airline's safety record when booking flights, and familiarizing ourselves with basic safety procedures can all contribute to a safer travel experience.
That's
helpful advice, but honestly, I'm still a little hung up on all those near misses, especially those clustered. In such a short period, it feels like more than just a coincidence.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. Well, individual near misses might be attributed to isolated factors. A cluster of them in a specific time frame could indicate
a systemic issue that needs further investigation.
Like what could be happening behind the scenes that's causing this uptick in close calls?
One possibility is increased air traffic volume. As more planes take to the skies, the potential for close encounters naturally increases. This puts additional strain on air traffic control systems and requires even greater vigilance from...
It's like rush hour in the sky. Everyone's trying to get where they need to go, and things get a little too close for comfort.
That's a good analogy. Another factor could be pilot fatigue. As airlines strive for efficiency, pilots are sometimes pushed to their limits in terms of flight hours and schedules. Fatigue can impair judgment and reaction time, increasing the likelihood of error.
I imagine technology plays a role here too, both for good and bad. We have amazing systems like DCS and autopilot that help prevent collisions and reduce pilot workload. But what happens when the systems fail?
Or are overloaded.
You're missing case at a crucial point. Technology is a double-edged sword in aviation. The maritime board adjacencies or the action of macation. But you know whole more. Merit can hail up to complacency or throttled decline in manual flying skills. And as you mentioned, error reliance on these systems can sometimes lead
vulnerabilities.
So it's about finding that balance again, relying on technology, but also making sure that pilots are adequately trained and prepared to handle situations when those systems aren't available or are malfunctioning.
Precisely. It's about having a layered approach to safety where human expertise complements technological advancements and where continuous training and vigilance are paramount.
All right. So we've explored specific incidents. We've talked about broader trends in aviation safety and delved into some of the factors that contribute to these events. So where does all this leave us? What are the key takeaways you want listeners to consider as they think about their own travel experiences?
I think the most important takeaway is that air travel remains statistically one of the safest modes of transportation. However, note, like any complex system, it's not without risks. Understanding the factors that contribute to these risks allows us to be more informed travelers and to advocate for continuous safety improvements.
I like that, informed travelers. It's not about letting fear dictate our choices, but about being aware, making informed decisions, and advocating for our own safety and the safety of others.
It's a powerful reminder that knowledge is our best tool when navigating something as complex as air travel.
Absolutely. But you know, while we've been so focused on these incidents and the potential causes, we can't forget about the human side of things. I mean, I can only imagine how terrifying those near misses must have been for the passengers on board.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the technical details and statistics, but we can't forget the human impact. These incidents can be deeply traumatic for everyone involved, passengers and crew.
And even for those of us who weren't on those flights, it's hard not to feel a little uneasy when you hear about these things. Makes you wonder, what if that were me? What if that were my family on board?
It's a natural human reaction. We all have that primal fear of falling, and these incidents tap into that fear, even if intellectually we know flying is statistically very safe.
So how do we reconcile those two things? That statistical safety of air travel and that very real fear and anxiety that these events provoke?
I think it comes down to a few key things. First, acknowledging that fear is valid. It's okay to feel anxious about flying, especially after a string of high-profile incidents. We shouldn't dismiss those feelings or try to pretend they don't exist.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that fear is a normal part of the human experience, especially when it comes to something that feels as out of our control as flying.
Exactly. Second, we can focus on what we can control, right? We can choose airlines with good safety records.
Yeah.
We can stay informed about weather conditions. We can familiarize ourselves with the safety procedures. These actions might seem small, but they can give us a sense of agency and empowerment.
So it's about taking practical steps to manage our anxiety and feel more prepared. It's not about eliminating risk entirely, because as we've discussed, that's impossible, but it's about feeling more confident in our choices.
Right. And perhaps most importantly, we can try to keep things in perspective. Air travel has revolutionized the way we live and experience the world. Millions of people fly safely every single day. Dwelling on the negative, while understandable, can really distort our perception of risk and prevent us from enjoying the many benefits of air travel.
Yeah, it's like anything else in life, right? You can't let fear paralyze you or prevent you from doing the things that matter.
I completely agree. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging the risks and appreciating the bigger picture.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Specific incidents, broader trends in aviation safety, the human element, and how to manage our own anxieties. But I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on as they navigate this ever-evolving world of air travel. We've talked a lot about the need for balance, balancing our reliance on technology with human skill, balancing our awareness of risks with an appreciation for the overall safety of aviation. But what I find fascinating is how this all ties into this larger conversation about trust. We trust airlines to prioritize safety. We trust pilots to make sound decisions. We trust air traffic control systems to keep us on course. But that trust can be fragile, especially when incidents occur.
That's a very insightful point. Trust is indeed fundamental to that entire aviation ecosystem. It's built on this complex web of regulations, oversight, training, and technological advancements, all designed to minimize risk and ensure passenger safety.
And when that trust is shaken, as it inevitably is when incidents like the ones we've discussed happen, it can be hard to restore. So the question for all of us is this: how do we as individuals and as a society, how do we maintain that trust in a world where risks are inherent and incidents are inevitable? How do we keep faith in a system that, despite its best efforts, is not and can never be perfectly foolproof? What do you think?
That's a profound question, and one that deserves careful consideration. Perhaps the answer lies in a combination of transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement. When airlines and aviation authorities are open about incidents, when they take responsibility for their actions, and when they demonstrate a commitment to learning from mistakes and enhancing safety protocols, that's when they earn the trust of the public. And for us as individuals, it's about staying informed, engaging in constructive dialogue, and advocating for our own safety and the safety of others.
I think that's a great note to end on. It's not about blind faith or ignoring the risks, but about informed trust, a trust that is earned through transparency, accountability, and a shared commitment to making air travel as safe as possible. Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation.
My pleasure. And remember, despite the headlines, air travel remains an incredible feat of human ingenuity, connecting us across continents and cultures. Let's keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working together to ensure the skies are safe for everyone.